Hello there, and welcome to my predictions for July 2025. I'm going to delineate the expected experiences for the world at large and then also for the individual zodiac signs. So I will provide societal predictions and horoscopes. So let's look at a general midpoint of July, by the way, just to start off. And again, in this video, I'm going to cover all the key transits, the ingresses, and the expected experiences again for the signs. So you want to stick around for all of it. And especially in this month, because just to start off with a summary of July, in July, the final piece of the puzzle is being provided. That piece being Uranus entering Gemini, which you can see on the screen. This will, in a way, show us the energetic contours of 2025. And it's going to add to the plethora of planets that are either in fire or air signs, with fire and air as elements being fast-paced and dynamic. So, it's no surprise that already there are sudden movements geopolitically and pieces being rearranged. And in some ways, I mean, the pecking order of imperial powers will look a lot different in a few years. And I think 2025 and 2026 is part of that destabilization and rearrangement. But none of this is really out of our hands. We can manifest a higher timeline that doesn't have to be so, conflict prone. We can really project, I think, an energy of love and understanding and empathy, and we can build communities, really. So I don't want you to be reading the news and thinking that, oh, I have to be a passive observer and these things are just happening to me. We can really construct our reality. But I think it has to happen with, first of all, local communities, really positive, strong relationships in our lives, and also, proper introspection, really meditating and working through really complicated karmic and spiritual material. And again, we can get to this better world. And I think we can get there actually by 2032 during the Saturn-Uranus conjunction. But if I'm being honest, until then, I think things are in flux. And with Uranus and Gemini, which we're about to see in July, I think it's important to accept that things will be changing quickly. And so, if anything, there will be a premium on agility and nimbleness. So, with that type of mindset of embracing those sort of changes, I think we can cross that bridge to that 2032 point when Saturn and Uranus meet up in Gemini. And I think that we can be part of a world that is fueled by technology, but for the right reasons, right? Technology that connects people across the world instantaneously who maybe share similar ideas or people who want to eagerly connect with each other, but like in a way that's more positive than maybe what we're seeing now. So, anyways, without getting too highfalutin or anything like that, just at a high level, again, July is giving us that final piece of this crazy puzzle of 2025. Now, what transits are going to define July? First of all, Venus and Uranus are going to line up towards the beginning of July, right before both Venus and Uranus go into Gemini. So that Venus conjunct Uranus transit in Taurus will definitely shake up some people's relationships. It can also point out maybe some alternative routes to monetization, making money. Some people will overhaul their values or have creative breakthroughs. Uranus and Gemini, obviously a dominant transit. This will add even more of a frenetic pace to things, but especially in Gemini territory, which could be like education, writing, language, media, and I'll again explain some of that a little bit more in detail as we go through. Mars conjunct the South Node at the same time that Mars is squaring Venus. This is in some ways to me like the biggest transit, and I'm actually showing that to you right now on the screen. So you're noticing, right here, Mars conjunct the South Node at 19 degrees of Virgo, almost in a partile square to Venus and Gemini at 18 degrees. And, that conjunction of Mars in the South Node is something that we see just under every 2 years or so. So the last time that Mars and the South Node were conjunct was around October 7th of 2023. And everybody remembers that time period as when Hamas attacked Israel. And obviously that stoked more widespread conflict, more intense conflict in the Middle East. And if you look back at 9/11, Mars was conjunct the South Node. So Mars South Node conjunctions typically are a bit more of a challenging transit. Now, if somebody has it in their birth charts, doesn't mean that they live they're not having like a life that's defined by, you know, suffering or aggression or attacks or anything like that. But when we see it in the transits, there can be some sudden, almost like violent incidents. There can be sudden conflict, offensives, and things like that. But in this case, because it's in Virgo, squaring Venus and Gemini, it could play out more in the technology space or with AI or something in the STEM related fields. There could be this fierce, ferocious debate going on about how to deploy AI or who owns a certain language learning model. I haven't been following the drama with Palantir, but I think there is some drama there. But also Mars conjunct the South Node, as I've described in other videos. I mean, it could certainly wreak havoc on the labor market, even though we typically see like major, swings in job availability, and the stock market usually fluctuates more so in the fall season or the spring, less so the summer. But I still think Mars conjunct the South Node could show disruption by AI and tech on the labor force. And it could also bring up some debates about health, nutrition, and even something in the fertility space because Jupiter is in Cancer. But anyways, that will be very much a transit that punctuates the month of July. Saturn and Neptune retrograde, both of these planets station retrograde in July. In Aries, I think that will reveal certain regimes to be, or it will expose certain regimes as tenuous. So perhaps in Iran. I mean, it could be Iran, it could be somewhere else, but any regimes that are sort of built on more, again, precarious ground, or they don't really have a firm grasp. They don't have the moral high ground, or they don't have a firm grasp of like the narrative in their country. Some of those regimes could be kind of further scrutinized and revealed to be even more sort of in disarray, in a state of disarray than we thought. Also, though, with Saturn Neptune retrograde, we are reflecting, I think, on the Aries house of our chart and what type of foundation we're trying to build, and ideally a foundation that is spiritually enlightening or aspirational. And it's showing now with Saturn Neptune that certain idealistic frameworks cannot hold, but it's also giving us reasons to hope and build a foundation that is aspirational. So it's kind of complicated in that way. So it feels like with Saturn Neptune, one foundation is crumbling, another one is being rebuilt in its place. So if you were to think about a country like Iran, if its theocracy fell, obviously that's a destabilizing effect at first, but it could be replaced by a regime or government that is more, let's say, liberating to its populace. Now, on a personal level, it's not like you're all having your own internal regime change per se, but it could show that in Aries you are reflecting on maybe your sense of courageousness and maybe how you want to lean into that more, and also where you've maybe idealized some aspects of Aries in your life, meaning maybe you've been bold in ways that are not or that are miscalculated, and you need to be bold in a more calculated way, take risks that are more well thought out. But I really think this is more of a collective retrograde. Again, revealing the systems, the governments, the sort of political thought, in those societies that is now maybe decrepit or outdated and needs to be replaced or challenged in some respect. And this could even, it doesn't have to be even a regime to me. It could be like an ideal that the society lives by is being challenged. And in Aries, I do think the retrograde is sort of a repositioning for a lot of countries in terms of how they want to assert their might militaristically. And I do think that this summer has been a preview of next year, meaning I've said this many times, but I do think that we're either already in World War III or next year really starts in an earnest way. Not that we have to manifest that, but just making you aware of that scenario, right? That is a potential scenario. We can, of course, build communities that are more heart-centered, try to spread love in a way that hopefully thaws away at the divisions. But technically, just reading the charts and using my intuition as well, you cannot deny that the Aries stellium in April 2026 is, extremely fractious, extremely discordant, and aggressive. So that would be the downside. And so during these retrogrades, countries are going to be re-strategizing and rethinking again their position as the deck gets rearranged a little bit before. I think that there will be a bit more of a full-blown global conflict next year. So it could get a little bit quieter again. I know a lot of people have questions about, Israel, Iran, US, and like that conflict that's been playing out over the past few days. As I'm filming this, actually, there was a ceasefire that was supposedly announced. Still has to be confirmed by all the nations, but the United States at least has announced it, or Trump has announced it. So that's not super surprising to me. And I'm going to break down how all of that unfolded astrologically in a bit. But it also shows here with the retrogrades coming up that perhaps there will be a reflection on what happened. And countries will reflect on whether or not they participated, by the way, in that event or in that whole skirmish. Countries of all across the world will reflect on how can we position ourselves and posture ourselves to be as strong as possible and ready and even resilient. And how can we position ourselves so that, again, we are ready for conflict. So will that be a country instituting a draft or a conscription? Possibly. It might be simpler than that. It might just be that nations across Europe or even in the US or whatnot, they're just sort of like adding, or they're investing even more in their militaries. They're making them even more. They're staffing their militaries with even more soldiers or generals or strategists. And I actually think a lot of military organizations across the world are trying to figure out, as Uranus goes into Gemini, how they can put up a buffer against cybersecurity threats and prevent those, and also how they can use maybe AI and technology to better inform their or to kind of beef up their capabilities and how they can use AI to just be competitive, right? In a world that is increasingly fought in the cybersecurity realm, but also in a world where people are using drones and people are using other forms of intelligence, using AI to understand what's going on and to maybe break through encryption or something. I don't know, but like there's a lot of different like specifics there. But I think that with the Uranus sextile to Saturn and Neptune and Aries, a lot of governments are beefing up their militaries, but also allocating more staffing and more resources towards AI technology and yeah, things like that. And maybe even media, like through social media, like trying to think about how to manipulate the messages through social media platforms. We also have Mercury retrograde in July in the sign of Leo. So because of that, actually, Mercury's only going to occupy Leo, the sign of Leo in July. It will never go into Virgo until September, or sorry, until August. And Mercury retrograde in Leo is a reflection on what brings us passion, what energizes us to express ourselves, like in how can we think about those things with Mercury retrograde? We're reflecting on again, how can we sort of reconnect with what brings us joy, and how can we communicate in a more charismatic way? And we're also rethinking the romantic aspects of our lives and our relationships, how, and communicating that upon reflection. So, am I in love with this aspect of my life or this relationship anymore? If you're a Scorpio rising, for example, like I'm showing here, am I in love with my job in the 10th house anymore? And so on. And so, as with any Mercury retrograde, it's a slowdown in anything mercurial, commerce, transportation, logistics, conversation, communication, major purchases need to be carefully considered. There can be delays with travel, and you want to proofread everything, all the usual stuff, which I'm not going to harp on. I mean, you get that stuff by now. The new moon in Leo will oppose Pluto on July 24th. I'll talk about that in a bit. That new moon is showing us where maybe we've become too obsessed with either someone because it's an opposition, which mimics the seventh house. Have we become too obsessed with someone or too obsessed with validation? That can be revealed with Pluto and Leo type of interactions. When I say that, I mean Pluto interacting with Leo. Obviously, Pluto is not in Leo. I'm saying Pluto and Leo, but I can imagine why it would sound like I said Pluto in Leo. Venus in Gemini, it will go across the entire sign of Gemini in July and then just get into Cancer by the end of the month. Venus in Gemini adds a more social dynamic to our relationships. We start to value education as well more, writing, reading, road trips, navigating our neighborhoods, interacting with people in our immediate environment. But then when it squares Mars, as we're seeing here, could bring up a lot of arguments and a lot of contentious debates, either about politics there, maybe there's some infighting within parliaments and, you know, within Congress. And also, I think that this could implicate, again, the use of like AI technology in the workforce. Maybe there's some debates about that. And then finally, we get Uranus trine Pluto. And finally, we get that trine in air signs. So we had like a sneak peek of it last year in 2024 because, while Uranus was in the later degrees of Taurus, it was trining Pluto in the later degrees of Capricorn. But it was by no means the exact trine. And we're not getting the exact trine even here, but we are in the spirit of the eventual trine into the coming years because they're in the signs where the exact trine will form. And with Gemini trining Aquarius and Uranus trining Pluto, it could spark some really positive revolutions in thought, political theory, again, AI and technology, language development. And I'm just going to propose a very out there prediction and idea, which is that perhaps while this trine plays out over the next couple of years, AI will actually develop its own language to communicate with other language learning models. Because I think what's happening is like, AI is obviously learning how humans think and it's learning what's out there on the internet, which is a reflection of how we think. But I think at some point AI will begin to encrypt its own communications with itself or with the other AI platforms. And we won't be able to break through that encryption or the code. And we won't really know and like the AI will develop a language of its own and a mind of its own. And it will operate with the intention of survival. So that's kind of scary to me, but I think that that will happen when Uranus trines Pluto. So like we are used to a relationship with AI where it's like very much almost like a pet, or it's like it's almost like just helping us. It's like a helper. And like we command it in English or whatever language you use, you command it in your home language and it like spits out the output. But I just think eventually, even though we may have that relationship with AI for a long time, AI could pass along coded messages to itself or to each other because it's obviously learning so many different human languages. Like it can learn how to come up with an evolved language, like maybe, and maybe not in deleterious ways. Maybe AI like comes up with a language that's just way more advanced than English or any other language. Because like, language is a technology, but AI might discover a language that allows us to kind of like convey things more quickly, more efficiently, or just more effectively, which sounds really weird, but I just feel like with Uranus and Gemini, there's something like that that's going to happen. It's like a new language being constructed that AI uses that, again, we don't have access to. I don't know. So apart from that, though, it could be a revolution in the use of like psychedelics for therapies and treatments, because it is the opening trine from the conjunction in the late 60s, right? So the conjunction happened in about 1967, and that was obviously a time when people were exploring psychedelics and more naturalistic ways of breaking through the conscious barrier and having these sort of mystical experiences, but also healing experiences. So that trine, I think, will be part of that. It will be the continuation of that revolution, which juxtaposed, I think, with the North Node in Pisces and Saturn Neptune conjunct, there could be more holistic ways of approaching health and wellness that maybe obviates the need for traditional the traditional medical system. But I'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. As for the key ingresses, we have Venus entering Gemini July 4th. So at the very beginning of July, we're dealing with the upheaval, probably, in many people's relationships or values. And then when it goes into Gemini, a more social demeanor takes over. Then Uranus goes into Gemini July 7th, which quickens the pace, hopefully generates even more genius ideas and maybe inspires people to collaborate with one another. And there will be a lot of innovation underway for sure when Uranus goes into Gemini, as well as revolutions within the mind. Revolutions in, again, political thought. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year there's a major country, maybe like Iran, but it could be another country where there's a total regime change and a redrafting of some kind of code of conduct or constitution or founding document, right? There's going to be a new founding document, in one of these countries. And then the sun goes into Leo July 22nd, where it is in its home sign, which is very expressive, and it does help us celebrate the things that we, you know, are well, like it helps us celebrate our creativity, right? And can bring on a bit more of a romantic flair. And it's obviously a very exuberant place for the sun to be. I think that's wonderful. And then Venus goes into Cancer July 30th. I don't think that will be a big feature, of course, of July. I just wanted to mention that. Now, as for the retrogrades and direct motions, we do have a number of movements happening because, and this stands out to me because in recent months, we haven't had a lot of changes in planetary direction. We had so many, obviously, in January, February, March, and April, but May and June, things started to calm down. And then now in July, we're going to get another shift here with actually four planetary bodies going retrograde. So nothing is going direct from a retrograde motion. Everything, if they're moving direction, are going retrograde. So in July, this is another key trend. Things are going to start to slow down a bit, whether it's career-wise, in terms of, the news headlines. I think they will slow down. Again, I'm talking as the ceasefire was announced. Who knows if it lasts, but I'm not surprised. Again, I'm not surprised that it's announced as of today. Number one, because there's a Cazimi with Jupiter happening in a few hours after I'm filming this. And Saturn, Neptune are, in a few weeks, they're going to go retrograde, which is more, to me, of a re-strategizing, like I said, among many nations regarding how they want to prepare for a possibly much greater, more widespread conflict or war. So anyways, Neptune will go retrograde July 4th. That is a time when you will reflect on your ideals around Aries themes. So your ideals around expressing courage, displaying courage, competing. And then Saturn retrogrades July 12th, which will scrutinize the Aries house of your chart. It will also scrutinize your professional decisions, your long-term decisions, and it will take a close look at your foundation. Are you set up for success, not only in the Aries house of your chart, but in the long run? And when it retrogrades, it will begin a retrograde path that brings it all the way back to 25 degrees of Pisces. So we are also going to feel already in July the weight of Saturn's sort of scrupulous nature in the Pisces house of our chart again. So let's say you're a Gemini rising. As soon as Saturn retrogrades, you're going to feel that sort of that energy of, again, responsibility, basically coming back to your 10th house. The energy of maybe limitation, responsibility, obligation, coming back to your 10th house is Gemini rising. So Gemini rising is like you're going to feel like your career is under the microscope again a little bit. And Saturn retrograde in Aries will also challenge us to both think about how to be decisive with our actions without being destructive. Because like Saturn wants the long term and Aries just wants the now, the impulse, the experience of the now. So Saturn in Aries is showing that impulsiveness has a high cost. So when it retrogrades, it shows us that there's a really high cost to impulsive action. But it's still showing us that we have to be decisive consistently and have a high degree of intention behind all of our actions if we want to get a lot of mileage out of Saturn and Aries. Mercury retrograde in Leo on July 17th is happening. I've talked about that already. And then Chiron stations retrograde on July 30th in Aries. And Chiron retrograde is, as always, highlighting the wounded masculine. And it is a reflection period of many months where we are thinking about how we can heal our wounded masculine and how we can demonstrate our sort of toughness in a way that's healthy, but also with Chiron and Cancer, we are, I think, always throughout this Chiron and Aries transit, striving for self-love, self-acceptance, to sort of embody the traits of Chiron, owning up to certain wounds, but also overcoming them or integrating them into our conscious awareness. Now, let's go into the noteworthy transits. So I've talked about the ingresses and sort of the dominant transits, but now I want to go through the transits just play by play, which I always do in these videos. So I'm going to reshare the screen in a second. I just want to adjust and get us back to the beginning of the month. And yeah, so we'll start off with July 1st and work our way to the end of the month. So July 1st, we have, let me actually widen the screen here. I feel like it's probably not quite wide enough for observing the transits. All right, so first one I want to highlight is, again, Saturn conjunct Neptune. This is happening all month. And the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is breaking down delusions, completely deconstructing ideals that are not actually grounded in anything substantive. And it is also a conjunction that, again, collectively is more so showing either organizations, consortiums, regimes, countries that are founded on untenable ideals as well. So the last time these planets conjoined was in the late 80s and early 90s, kind of during the collapse of the Soviet Union. So in that way, that ideal was brought, well, not to an end, but it was definitely dealt a blow. And so in this case, could it be Iran's theocracy? Could it be, something else? And I think Saturn conjunct Neptune is also highlighting well, it's also kind of holding up a measuring stick to various religious ideas, even. Like, is this religion being used to oppress people, or is it integrated in society in a delusory way? And also with Saturn conjunct Neptune, we are witnessing, as we witness the collapse of certain systems, we're also witnessing the rise of a new type of individual, I think. An individual that refuses to comply with this sort of forced assimilation into a societal framework or decree, because it's like we don't want to bend and break, in sort of in response. We don't want to break in response to these very oppressive societal rules or dictates. And, Aries is about the individual. So it's all about finding your sovereignty and your autonomy in a world that is maybe not reliable, where institutional trust is continuing to decline and so on. But this conjunction will not actually form its partile conjunction until next February. So just want to reiterate that, like, this is a preview of next year. So the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, I think, has already manifested in all the conflict between Iran, Israel, and the US. But it's also a slow and steady decline of certain maybe leaders or, again, ideals that don't have staying power anymore. I mean, you could chalk that up to any type of ideal. It could be something like, I don't know, taking money out of politics. It's like, well, we live in a democracy technically, but politicians are bought and sold by corporations, which are donating to them. So, like, do they really represent the people, or do they represent the interests of corporations? I think with Pluto in Aquarius sextiling Saturn and Neptune, which is also going to be sextiling Uranus, we have this minor grand trine, which is really just the top of a kite. And that is very supportive of new ideas in the political space, completely new political theories that maybe lift up the individual, but it's not going to be handed to us on a platter. With Pluto being in Aquarius, it's up to us, right, to cultivate these communities and networks that are trying to ideally raise the frequencies and the vibrations. Right, and to not give into fear. Like the fear timeline is not something we have to hold on to. We don't have to hold on to the fear-based timeline. There's a timeline that's based on love that we can absolutely foster with these sextiles and trines. So don't think about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction as like a full-blown collapse of the all the, structures in society, and like it's going to be an apocalyptic scenario. It's not. Because it's sitting in the middle of that trine with Uranus and Pluto, it's like Uranus and Pluto trine is innovation. It's a healthy, positive, momentum driving wave towards innovation, experimentation, consciousness opening. And being in the middle of that trine, it's showing us that any collapse of an old world order is hopefully being replaced by something that is more egalitarian, more grassroots, and just helping us move towards a better future in 2032, which I've talked about. But I also wonder if in some nations, AI and technology will begin to replace politicians entirely and make decisions for the collective. I'm not saying I'm advocating for that or that there's not downsides, but AI could replace some form of government in some country over the next couple of years, especially while Uranus is trining Pluto. But even if that doesn't happen, regime change with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and dissolution is creating a vacuum that I think is replaced by something better because of the Uranus-Pluto trine. It's replaced by ideas that are grounded in liberal thought. And I mean liberal generally. I'm not talking about left versus right here. I'm just saying we are hopefully architecting a society that's based on like the idea of, again, autonomy, sovereignty, free expression of ideas, especially in nations that are very oppressive. But even like in the US, right? It's very clear, at least to me, that our national representatives are not representative because, again, it requires you have to pass a certain threshold monetarily to be an elected official, basically, which means you have the ear of like all these lobbyists and whatnot. So, anyways, I've talked about that conjunction probably a little too much there, but I guess I'll say one more thing about it. Yes, you have to build your own communities, think local, think grassroots, but you also have to like strengthen yourself. And honestly, this might be the most important point of this conjunction. Saturn and Neptune in Pisces was very passive. It was very illusory, and it was very weak in a lot of ways. A lot of people played like they were these helpless, victims of life, like they couldn't do anything about their lives. And that's ending. I mean, that's just that mentality is not really in vogue anymore. It's just sort of um it's not going to be part of the ethos anymore, right? Like this idea of like we are all suffering and our lives are defined by suffering. That is ending. Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, especially with the transits that are joining those planets in Aries next year, is showing us that we have to really lean into as much as we can, right? Our physical strength, strengthening the body, being able to defend and protect ourselves, being able to respond to challenge, And honestly, in a way, strengthening ourselves for whatever war is coming. I mean, I really think that there's a world war. I mean, I predicted this many times. I think we're already in it, but I think it's going to be exacerbated next year. So Saturn and Neptune is showing, like, to the greatest extent possible, can you be standing on your own individual ground? And I know that some people like don't have the option to like just hit the gym every day. I'm sympathetic to that. I'm not trying to say like everybody should just be like a gym rat. Like I'm not trying to argue for that. But to the greatest extent possible that you can be in your body, in the visceral, in the 3D, feeling like you have your strength, at least at the peak strength that like whatever peak strength looks like for you, you want to be at that peak strength. Saturn and Neptune is showing you that like some government or some hierarchy, some organization out there is not going to be the one to help you at this point. And whether that's fair or not fair, I'm not here to tell you that. I'm not making any normative claims about this, but it's certainly obvious to me that these like world organizations and consortiums that operate in cooperative environments, like they're dissolving. So we're not necessarily going to be allocating as many tax dollars or resources towards these organizations that are being tasked with helping everybody and being a steward of the earth. And again, I'm not couching that under positive or negative terms. I mean, to maybe add in my own, because I know a lot of you think it's annoying that I don't insert my own opinion in these episodes or shows or whatever the fuck we want to call this. But like, truth is, like, I don't think that that adds value to these types of predictions because I try to stay objective. But, let's talk about a cause I care about. I mean, I do think that we need to reverse the rise in greenhouse gases. I think that pollution is a problem. I think that we disrespect the planet that we live on. I think that, since the industrial age, it's pretty obvious why temperatures have been rising, even if there are like macro cycles of temperatures rising and falling. Obviously, there's been ice ages and other periods on Earth where temperatures have been rising, but I just think in general, like nobody likes to stand next to an exhaust pipe, right? Like you don't want to breathe that in. So, like, I believe that we should obviously protect our natural habitats. We don't want to have like all of our national parks just be taken over by private interests. Like, absolutely, I believe that we should be trying to reverse the effects of, the damaging effects of like pollution and those sort of negative externalities. And you could argue that you need some kind of global initiative to tackle that. Because if everybody leans on the idea of personal responsibility and the buck stops there, then we're not going to accomplish those bigger goals about like saving the planet or saving a certain species of an animal or a fish or something. Like that is problematic in my opinion. But at the same time, the question here, like with Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, is like we're taking a more individualistic frame on things around do we really need some like national or worldwide organization to like pretend to tackle this one issue when they're really just taking, I don't know, if they're really money laundering or something? Like, I think that there is going to be a preference for individualism, but not this whole like every man is an island or every human is an island sort of phrase, right? We're not taking that approach. We're saying buffer, or sorry, not buffer, but sort of, you know, build up the sense of individuality, reinforce that, but then bring that into a community where people are cooperating. Because we have the trine going on in July in air signs between Uranus and Gemini, Pluto, and Aquarius. Like that's asking you to share ideas with people, share your opinions with people, and again, to innovate, brainstorm, and connect. Like this is not happening in isolation. So this is a revolution in ideas coming up in July. Just a second, I have to turn the lights on in my room right now. It's way too dark. All right. So, anyways, let's I guess we'll move on from that. We okay, so now we have Mercury opposite Pluto, by the way, to start the month. Mercury opposite Pluto is something that is sort of an overhang from late June, but Mercury opposite Pluto combined with Venus-Uranus conjunct could show that secrets are being revealed in relationships. So, like if your partner is cheating on you or sending salacious text messages to somebody, that could be exposed. Could be exposed. So, a lot of breakups probably in the beginning of July, late June. Now, I'm not trying to say that everyone would experience that, but that's the energy of it. Like if your partner's been dishonest with you, that could come out of nowhere. And other people could just reinvent the relationship to lift it out of stagnation. And with Mercury opposite Pluto, just getting really honest about, their needs or their, they may even like decipher what their partner is really thinking and say, well, I've noticed that you've been off lately. What's going on? And so maybe you just get to the bottom of something and then you reach a new level of authenticity in that relationship. And then off of that, Venus conjunct Uranus, really July 1 through 10. So all the way till July 10th, those planets are pretty much conjunct, even though, it starts to achieve separation. You can see that here. I think it's still ongoing until the 10th, pretty much. And you could argue technically until the orb of influence on the 13th is passed. But anyways, the Venus-Uranus conjunction, early July, could again upend relationships, but when it goes into Gemini, it's sort of exciting. You could develop a lot of new connections, a lot of new friendships during that time. Or you might even be connecting with people in a digital space or online with Uranus there. But a lot of sudden encounters out of nowhere. So I think for a lot of people, social activity will pick up. And then we have Mars conjunct the South Node and square Venus simultaneously. I feel like I've already kind of talked about this one, but that conjunction of Mars in the South Node could be very damaging to a certain aspect of the job market, like a certain industry, could be like completely shredded by new technologies that are automating jobs that were previously seen as safe. It could also coincide with a sudden attack, honestly, because that happens a lot with Mars South Node conjunctions. There can be these sudden attacks or punctures or wounds or acts of aggression that we may read about in the news. And with the square to Venus and Gemini, it could be between like feuding siblings even. I feel like hopefully it's not Liam and Noel Gallagher because I want Oasis to get through their reunion tour, but it certainly gives the energy of like siblings that are feuding. So that's around July 20th, but it really has the orb of influence to span, I think, July, the 18th, 19th through probably like really the end of July even. But yeah, Mars in Virgo conjunct the South Node of Virgo could also highlight maybe health challenges that some people are having that they have to respond to. It could show, how some people maybe are a little bit off track with their health journey. And honestly, some people may deal with an injury because they're pushing their fitness plan a little too hard there. But ideally, Mars conjunct the South Node in Virgo is helping you release either frustrations that are a little bit too myopic, or it's pointing out maybe a different way for you to strengthen yourself or to deal with a health challenge. And Mars in Virgo to me brings up a lot of like IBS and indigestion. So definitely watch out for like what types of foods you're eating around July 20th, 21st, because if let's say that you typically get an upset stomach when you eat raw bell peppers. I mean, that happens to me for some reason. I would not eat raw bell peppers on that day. And with the square to Venus, it's a little bit cerebral to me. Like, again, it feels like a debate happening between you and someone you know, maybe a sibling, even, like I said. Or it's a debate in the public forum around AI, between AI companies, how to deploy AI for automation. And maybe this is a worker rebellion, a worker revolt. They're revolting against some company policy about, using AI and justifying a 20% layoff rate because of that. I could definitely see some people organizing for that reason. And then the Sun and Moon are opposing Pluto July 24th. This is kind of a gnarly opposition because the Sun and Moon simultaneously opposing Pluto, it's an extreme situation, really. It's either revealing to you that you have extreme needs for validation that you have to work on, or it's pointing out an addiction that someone has that is in your life. And with Leo being like kings and queens and royalty, maybe there's someone in like the royal family that's being implicated here, or like in the UK. Or maybe there's an announcement about the death of some like major royal figure, or king-like kind of person. And it is trining Saturn and Neptune, which I like. So there's some productive actions being taken, but opposite Pluto, like if I had this birth chart, if someone had this birth chart, it would pretty much show that only one parent was involved in that child's life, and that the parent that was present was probably struggling with a lot of addictions or extreme behaviors. And honestly, some people with this chart would not know either of their parents, actually. And again, if they knew their parents may have a bit of a validation addiction or something. So I think this opposition is bringing up some sort of like extreme behavior in relationships that either tries too hard to get validated by either the partner or someone else, or people are feeling resentful or bitter about someone else's validation. It's just like the type of new moon that can be very petty, trivial, and get wrapped up in, um, again, not to bring up Oasis, but this kind of does look like the type of chart that would lead to like a breakup of a band like Oasis. Because if you're in a relationship that where either party does not have a healthy sense of self, where they have a fragile ego, we'll say, that relationship is on thin ice around July 24th. So just be aware of that. But I'll talk about the new moon in a second more thoroughly. And then Uranus trine Pluto all month. I already talked about that, but I just wanted to mention that that's a transit that's happening all month. So now I'm going to go through the executive trends a little bit more, which, as always, involves a retrospective on the previous month. So I think I'm just going to talk about that in this format without the chart for now. Actually, no. You know what? Sorry, I changed my mind. I realized that I actually have to show the charts to do the retrospective because obviously June was a very monumental, historic period in the space of, war in the Middle East, and we'll go through all that. So I guess before I do that, though, let's talk about the other unfortunate event with month of June. So June showed us that the Mars-Uranus cycle is more volatile now than in years past or even centuries past because Pluto is now in Uranus's sign for the first time since the late 1700s. So this means that anytime Mars and Uranus form hard aspects, Uranus is also dispositing Pluto because Pluto is in Uranus's sign. So given Pluto's darker subtext, the outcome would be more violent and shocking than in cycles of yesteryear. So the cycle began July 13th of 2020 or 15th of 2024, which essentially coincided with the assassination attempt on Trump at his rally in Pennsylvania. And then we finally get the opening square between Mars and Uranus, which was almost a year separated from the conjunction, which is rare. And this time there was another unfortunate act of political violence in my home state of Minnesota with, the assassination of those state representatives by, what's his name? Vance Bolter. And it is eerily familiar with what happened last July. So political violence, unfortunately, I do believe will probably be more common anytime Mars and Uranus are forming a hard aspect over the next, you know, 20, 20 years that Pluto is, in 19 years that Pluto's in Aquarius. Also, we saw and again, that was driven by the Mars-Uranus square in this case. Also, the ICE raids in LA and around the country sparked protests around the country, which is also in line with Mars-Uranus, though. Because Mars and Uranus can motivate the collective to gather together, vouch for independence, liberation, autonomy, egalitarianism. And, it can inspire quote unquote rule breaking, whatever that means, right? Which in some cases is actually helping to point out areas of oppression. And in other cases, it can threaten the social order, though. So the Mars-Uranus cycle going forward, the whole time that Pluto is going to be in Aquarius here, is going to show that it's a double-edged sword. It could lead to more like vigilante and, sort of shocking, disruptive events that are volatile and violent, but it can also lead to rallies, protests, and demands by the public for, you know, a bit more of a rebalancing of power. Because, like I said, we live in this world, at least in the US, where it technically is a democracy in the sense that, anyone can vote. Like, as long as you're a citizen, you don't have a certain level of criminal record. I don't remember what the exact threshold is, but basically, the vast majority of people above 18 and over, I mean, can vote, but our choices are very restrictive because the people we are voting for are bought and sold by various interest groups. And those interest groups are interested in themselves and the preservation of their profits. They're not interested in like our well-being or our health or life extension or anything like that. So you could argue that like we're in a democracy in name only, right? And most of you would probably tell me in the comments, obviously, Evan, we already know this. It's like a plutocracy, it's a whatever, oligarchy, and so on. Like whatever you believe the system is, like I think most of us agree that it is democracy mostly in name, in a nominal sense. It's almost like a just sort of a ceremony. It's like voting is just sort of like a way of preserving for democracy to preserve face. So the Mars-Uranus square, it can also lead to this sort of power to the people type of movement. But now I want to jump to what's going on with Israel, Iran, and the US. So Israel's campaign, we'll call it was a campaign of, I guess, aggression against Iran. They were attacking Iran, initiating all these attacks about 10 days ago in mid-June, and that was because of the Mars-Uranus square. And I'll backtrack to that. So the Mars-Uranus square, by the way, is implicating Israel's chart and Trump's chart. Like Trump and Israel's charts are intertwined. But anyways, just to build this a little bit. So Mars was squaring Uranus in mid-June. That coincided on Friday, June 13th, with Israel's attack on Iran. Now, obviously, this is not an isolated incident. Like Israel and Iran have been fighting against each other for a long time by proxy with Iran's proxy militia groups and whatever. Hamas, Hezbollah, or Hamas, I think is not necessarily. Anyways, I'm not an expert on Middle Eastern factions, but let's just say essentially Iran has proxy militias who have been attacking Israel and so on. And so I'm not going to get into that whole soup. I'm not going to open that can of worms because everybody knows that the fact of the matter is that there has been a contentious back and forth between many nations in the Middle East for decades, centuries, and so on. It's not the point of what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is the Mars-Uranus square coincided with Israel attacking Iran. And Mars square Uranus can be very volatile and violent and sudden. And it metastasized into a broader conflict when basically Trump felt as if he was in a position where Israel forced his hand to he had to like kind of help out in some way, he felt. Now, why did Trump feel that way? Well, there's people in the comments who are going to tell me, well, it's because Israel has dirt on Trump. I don't know, it's certainly possible. But astrologically, what's happening is that there is a Trump-Israel connection because Trump and Israel both have Mars in the later degrees of Leo. So Israel, I think, has Mars at 28 Leo. And Trump has his ascendant at 29 Leo, his Mars at 26 Leo. So basically, from that lens, as long as Uranus is in the final decan of Taurus, which it will be off and on for the next year until April 2026, like it will be aspecting Israel's Mars and Trump's ascendant and Trump's midheaven, which basically means that for the next 10 months, Israel and Trump, which AKA is the US policy essentially, because Trump just decrees these things by executive order, whether or not they're legal, there is a strong possibility that Israel and the US could be in this sort of like two-pronged mode of attack all the way through April of next year. And in that perspective, Uranus in the last degrees of Taurus is actually more chaotic than Uranus in the early degrees of Gemini, I think. And in the final decan of Taurus, it's in a Capricorn decan, which is all about disruption at the level of governments, which I actually called out many years ago. So, anyways, it did metastasize into a broader conflict when Trump ordered a three-pronged strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. And again, this connects to predictions I've made in years past. 3 years ago, I was on TikTok saying we are probably on the precipice of World War III because Pluto is about to oppose the World War II Pluto. Nuclear power was a defining feature of World War II. Obviously, there were other things like the Holocaust, like um, you know, Pearl Harbor. There's so many things about World War II, obviously, but nuclear power was obviously a centerpiece of World War II. So, with Pluto opposing the World War II Pluto, which was about 2 degrees of Leo. And when I say the World War II Pluto, by the way, I'm talking about the birth chart for World War II, which is like September 1939. But Pluto also represents nuclear power anyways. And with Pluto in Aquarius, we have seen in previous Pluto cycles innovations around weapons technology. So many years ago, I said there probably will be another world war, given the Uranus return from World War II coming up, the Pluto opposition, Neptune opposition, and so on. But also, it's centered around nuclear power because of the Pluto opposition, and there's a religious undertone to it in some way. Because the Aries stellium next year, April 2026, is happening as the North and South Node are squaring Aldebaran and Antares, which are fixed stars that are heavily associated with the Crusades. So I've maintained this for years. We are on the cusp of a final crusade of sorts, which is the last dying gasp of the age of Pisces. So we're still a couple hundred years away, arguably, from the full, age of Aquarius thing, era. And they overlap though. So right now, the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius are kind of overlapping. We're still in the age of Pisces, but we're towards the end of it. So as we approach the later stages of the age of Pisces, I think there will be some kind of final religious war that eventually gets us beyond this idea of like religiously motivated divisions. Right. So, it's very profound. It's very profound what's going on. And sorry, just a second. I have to adjust something. As always, there's so many ridiculous tech things. But yeah, we are experiencing this sort of late stage Piscean age sort of convulsion. And I've circled this many times, but April 2026 is when a lot of this comes to a head and catalyzes. And a lot of you are going to say it's not about Christian versus Islam versus Judaism or whatever, Christianity. Because obviously, like, there is this intertwining here between like Israel and other nations that are more Christian. So there's many ways to divide the conflict, obviously, but you can't deny that this Aries stellium is very fractious, like I said earlier. And with Mars conjunct Neptune and Saturn, it feels like there's sacrifices being made in the name of like a god or religion, especially with the conjunction of Neptune and this sort of glorification of war. So, especially with the North and South nodes squaring Aldebaran and Antares, pretty much, right? That's looking real intense. So let me circle back, though. Let me circle back. Um, so the Pluto opposition of World War II explains why there's nuclear power involved at the center of the conflict. We also, by the way, did see the Sagittarius full moon a few, like, 2 weeks ago. We're still in that cycle, which was a climax of the Sag new moon, December 1st, which happened conjunct Antares. It was conjunct Antares. So if people are like, well, Evan is clearly just, inventing this idea, trying to stretch for some sort of conception of a religious conflict, I don't think so. Because that new moon was almost exactly aligned with Antares. And it takes about 6 months, approximately, to reach the full moon phase in that same sign, right? So advance the chart to June, I think 11th of 2025. And we had the Sagittarius full moon, which was not conjunct Antares, obviously, but it was the climax of that Antares new moon last year. And I actually talked about that. If you go back to my TikToks and my Instagrams, and even my YouTube, I think, I talked about how, around that time there was a religiously motivated thing. And obviously the Luigi Mangione thing, his assassination of the healthcare CEO happened 3 days later, I think. But either way, I mean, that's interesting, right? Like you saw the Luigi Mangione thing happen within the microcycle, basically within the lunation cycle of that Sag new moon. But within the macro cycle of like the Sag full moon happening 6 months later or so, you are seeing a different type of crusade. So it's kind of interesting, right? That I kept talking about crusades last December. I was like, there's a kind of a crusade going on. And it didn't quite happen that way in December, but it certainly is happening that way now. And of course, back then I talked about there were healthcare related themes going on, people changing their perspective on health. But anyway, so we'll continue on. So again, the Trump-Israel connection is astrological. It's not just conspiratorial. It's not that he has to have some sort of connection through it's not that he has to be in like the Epstein files or something or whatever for Israel to have some kind of upper hand on him. Even astrologically, like their Mars placements are intertwined and the ascendant is pretty intertwined there. So they kind of act in lockstep anyways. And also we do have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, but also squaring Jupiter, which brings up legal questions around his decision to even attack in the first place. Um, and also, by the way, we have this Saturn-Neptune in Aries backdrop, which again increases the likelihood of like military offensives and military action. But I want to talk about why the attacks happened on Saturday, June 21st. So why did they happen that day? You're not gonna see a lot of astrologers talk about this, but this is really important because I actually think this is the primary driver of the actual dropping of the bunker busting bombs. It was the double yod formation, which I actually spoke about in all of my 2025 horoscopes. So if you downloaded my 2025 predictions, like even the horoscopes just on a personal level, I talked about this double yod. And it's on the key trends page. And I only list about 10 transits that define 2025, and this was one of them. It really jumped out at me. I was doing a lot of deep research on the year of 2025 well in advance, and I saw this double yod, and I was like, well, we have two fingers of God here. And these yods are actually connected because Mars and Pluto are in both yods. So I pontificated that it's either about AI and some kind of damaging AI coming out or some feud between AI companies, which did happen with Palantir apparently, or it's a military initiative. Because we got Saturn and Mars in conjunct. Saturn-Mars aspects coincide with military action. Mars-Pluto in one yod, or actually in two yods, sorry. That's all about relentless, fierce, intense action and sometimes even coercion. But Mars-Pluto aspects are very intense, destructive even. But with Mars and Virgo, it's very exacting and precise, which we saw with like the planes, it was very coordinated attack and they had to be very stealthy about it, which also is kind of Pluto, right? Mars, Pluto attacking in secret. And Mars in conjunction Neptune is showing that the attack involves some kind of deception, where it's like the planes are over here. Oh, no, wait, they're over here. And with Neptune, though, it's like we're kind of wondering maybe what was the true extent of the damage. That's being debated right now, right? Are the nuclear sites fully decimated, obliterated, or just scathed? And then with Jupiter involved in one yod, we're talking about across borders, foreign lands. So these yods are pretty obviously some kind of military attack, a very coordinated one. And it's very complex because when you have yods, you're dealing with a decision where neither is ideal, like or a situation where neither decision is ideal. And Trump kind of reflected that sentiment last week when he was not really wanting to just stay on the sidelines, but he also didn't necessarily want to get the US involved in a Middle East war. So that's kind of reflected there. And yachts are entanglements and yachts are awkward. And I talked about this a week ago on like another live show I was doing. I was like saying how these two yachts feels like you're trying to pry something open from awkward angles and eventually just kind of like the box breaks open in this really awkward way. And it's almost like, you know, it's like you don't know when it's going to burst open. That's the feeling of these yachts too. And it's like all these missteps led up to these double yachts, basically. It's like an entanglement that you have to untangle, or you have to disentangle is like technically the right word there. So yeah, however you slice it, those yachts were the driving force. I didn't want to see someone else say that it was because of Saturn, Neptune, and Aries only, or whatever. It's all about the yacht here. Mars square Uranus had something to do with the aggravation initially, where like Israel was attacking Iran. Certainly that was the initiation of some of this, but without this double yod, there would not have been a response. The US would not have been in a position where or the administration, I should say, because this was really driven by Trump. Obviously, Congress is very disgruntled about this because technically Congress has to approve war, right? Actions and decrees of war. But either way, this double yod is a big reason why. In fact, it is the reason why the US ended up actually attacking and responding. And I discussed this in June, my June predictions, I mean. I said during his Mars return, Trump was going to be under a lot of pressure, a lot of duress, and stress, and that's exactly what happened. He was contending with these two different decisions, neither of which I don't think either of which were all that palatable to him. Based on his rhetoric, at least, it seemed like he was a little hesitant with either of the options. Now, I also want to mention quickly that Uranus is about to go into Gemini. A lot of astrologers are, you know, stoking fear, saying, well, Uranus and Gemini coincides with war. I want to push back on that a little bit. Uranus in Gemini, yes, has been present for three major wars that the US has been involved in. But you can point out many wars like Vietnam, World War I, where Uranus wasn't in Gemini. So what's the takeaway there? Well, we're always in a war. So to say that Uranus and Gemini coincides with war is kind of a dumb comment, in my opinion. I've made the comment in shorthand a couple times, admittedly, but it's sort of like, you're, I don't know, it's just making a proclamation about something that is ubiquitous, right? It's always the case. So it's not necessarily showing a clear correlation between the two. But it does remain to be said that Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War II were all present with Uranus and Gemini. Now, in July, let's jump to July a little bit more. Um, so, what and again, there was a ceasefire announced hours before I filmed this. I'm not surprised, like I said, by that. I think that probably will stand. I think this was just a flash in the pan compared to what's happening next year. I think next year there will be a more extensive battle going on between axes of power, really. Maybe it's Russia, Iran, China banding together against the West. I mean, there's kind of like an East versus West sort of thing, and a lot of people think China is going to rise in the long term through the rest of the century. It's probably going to happen, I mean, to be honest, but certainly the West is going to be putting up a fight for the next few years. So yeah, in July, we're going to see the trine. I'm going to reiterate this. We're going to see the trine with Uranus and Pluto. The trine is a lot softer than the opposition of Uranus and Pluto, for example, which was present, by the way, during the French Revolution. And on that point with the French Revolution, on July 14th of 1789, during the storming of the Bastille, Uranus was around the conjunction with Aldebaran, by the way, in Gemini. So I'm curious to see, as a quick aside, what happens next July when Uranus breaches Aldebaran again, this time with Uranus in Gemini. That could be kind of revolutionary in some countries. But anyways, this trine coming up in July is softer. It's nothing like what we saw in the French Revolution when Uranus was in Leo opposing Pluto and Aquarius. So I think this trine could stimulate fresh ideas, especially in the political sphere. It could inspire a regime change, right? Especially in a place like Iran, where the regime is in a tenuous position. Mars is going to meet the South Node. I've talked about that. Oh, right, Jupiter. I wanted to talk about this. I was looking through my notes, trying to figure out what was net new in these notes. Jupiter will carry on through the entire first decan of Cancer in this month. And this is a moon-ruled sign, right? And the decan itself is moon-ruled. And it's going to expand the idea of family, nurturing. It's very somatic as a sign. So a lot of people will be healing themselves, nurturing themselves. And I think with Jupiter and Cancer, you're going to notice more pregnancy announcements, more births. And I think the whole industry around fertility and birthing will be a focus over the next year. Because, I mean, I think it's pretty fraught with corruption and profit motive, obviously, but like I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Business of Being Born as a documentary, but essentially in the US, the vast majority of births are in hospitals, but we also have like a higher infant mortality rate than a lot of countries that do a lot more home births. So I think there might be a movement while Jupiter's in Cancer, not only towards more births and more pregnancies, because I think that will happen. I think that there will be more pregnancies while Jupiter's in Cancer, especially for Pisces and Cancer placements. But there will also be maybe a more naturalistic return to like home births and working with doulas and midwives because it does seem to be an industry, right? The process of birth giving in our country is like what is like a third are C-sections, a third of births are C-sections. And that's all because doctors got to get home at a certain time. And we're also seeing how there's a lack of understanding about the birth process. It's actually a very beautiful process. And it's partly because we put a lot of shame around the feminine experience of birthing, and a lot of our Western medical industrial complex is very masculine driven. It's almost entirely from a masculine frame. So we treat it almost as this thing that we have to keep our distance from. It's almost taboo. And so we treat it in this very mechanistic fashion. So I think when Jupiter's, and I could talk about this for an hour, but when Jupiter goes into Cancer now, or now that it's in Cancer, I think we will not swing the pendulum all the way back to naturalistic births. Unfortunately, I mean, I think that we should be doing more home births, but the tide will start to shift. I think a lot of education will be going on in communities around the benefits of a natural birth. Because again, like you don't need to be surrounded by these doctors who take a mechanistic view and of birth. You don't have to do that. So anyways, and then Saturn, Neptune retrograde I talked about, but that's going to illuminate the potential weakness of certain structures, governments, or regimes that cannot sustain the pressure either from the outside or from their own populace. And then I talked about Uranus and Gemini a little bit about language. It will create ripple effects that eventually lead to revolutions in, again, language, whether it's AI developing its own language or real-time translation software. It'll revolutionize the media, travel, transportation, and education. And with, Pluto and Aquarius, we've seen a lot of deadly plane crashes. And unfortunately, I do think that that could be a trend. I mean, it's almost like, and I've talked about this for years now, like Pluto and Aquarius, Pluto being the planet of death and rebirth, but also death in the sign of aviation, Aquarius, like, I just saw today a United flight had to be like emergency landed in Iceland, like a commercial flight from San Francisco to Rome. Like, flying is not going to be what it used to be for a long time. But it also will sort of accelerate the innovation towards new modes of transportation. I think with Uranus and Gemini, there will be new modes of communication, new devices that are beyond the smartphone's capabilities, but also new ways of getting around the country, maybe, or around your region in a way that obviates the need for flying. Another thing, though, about Uranus and Gemini is, again, media disruption. And I think an increasing share of content will be AI driven. Like a lot of the content we watch already is, but increasing amounts will be. And eventually the internet is going to risk becoming a detached, pointless domain where AI is just trading data and content. So let's try to, I don't know, just be mindful of that, right? And also, maybe it's not the answer to be mindful of it. Maybe it's just that we have to think about a different area to play in. Maybe AI eventually is just going to use the internet to coordinate logistics and problem solve and do research. And the internet will just be this engine that keeps the world running without our intervention or involvement. So then the question becomes like, what's the role of the human being? Because I think it's just to experience, relationships and love and to be creative. I mean, and so on. I'm not going to wax poetic about it for too long there, but now as for the full moons and new moons, let's go to those. So we have a Capricorn full moon on July 10th. That's at 18 degrees of Cap. And what's going on there? Well, the chart ruler, which is, oh, sorry. I was looking at the wrong notes. The chart ruler Saturn is conjunct Neptune and Aries, squaring Jupiter. And, well, Jupiter's definitely, yeah. Well, Jupiter's squaring Neptune at least, but still Saturn a little bit. And then we all have Uranus and Gemini by then, conjunct Venus, trining Pluto. Mars getting close to the South Node conjunction, Mars square Venus, and then Saturn, the ruling planet of Capricorn, stationing retrograde 2 days later. So, number one, this is the climax of something that started either June 25th for you or December 30th of 2024 when we had a Cap new moon. And it is revealing to me an area of your life that has long-term potential, as well as things that are too limiting and restrictive now that have to go away. And I think the key question is, what are you willing to take responsibility over? And, I like the fact that this is a Cap full moon without Pluto being in Cap. That's nice. It's out of the orb of influence to be conjunct Pluto, thank God. But it is right before Saturn stations retrograde, so we are heavily scrutinizing our long-term plans, both in the Capricorn house of our chart and the Aries ruled house. So I think with this Cap full moon, a lot of people will be putting to rest a certain career or obligation or responsibility, or they will realize that they actually have to own up to the responsibilities that they have and do so courageously with Saturn and Aries. And then we have a Leo new moon July 24th, which is at 2 degrees of Leo. And again, this one is real problematic because it's opposing Pluto. That's destructive, that's secretive, that's manipulative, that's power hungry. And in this case, the chart ruler is the sun. It's exactly opposite Pluto. The Sun and Moon are trining Saturn and Neptune. I talked about that. Mars is finally conjunct the South Node on top of this and square Venus, and then Mercury is now retrograde in Leo. So this one is not so great. This new moon is, again, highly destructive, especially with the Mars South Node conjunction. Now, if we were to see an attack, like some sort of attack on a leader, it probably would happen around this time. Like I said, the waters have kind of calmed generally. I think they're starting to calm. I actually think they're going to start to calm a little bit between Iran, Israel, and the US. But that's not to say that there's not some country like Iran that's planning some crazy shit that could take effect in late July. So it might not happen on this day, but like certainly within this lunation cycle. And a lot of people are asking me like, "Oh, are planes all going to be shut down and grounded in late June?" I don't think so. I mean, the Saturn Jupiter conjunct or square, I should say, it's not great, but with Saturn and Jupiter and Cancer, a lot of people are going to be domesticated or homebound, or they're going to be staying home a lot. I mean, Jupiter was in Cancer during 9/11. We are in the year of the snake again, like we were in 2001. But I don't want to manifest that. So like with those types of predictions, it's like, yeah, it's floating in the back of my head, like it could happen, but I really don't like to emanate that energy at all. So again, like we can be on a love-based timeline. We don't have to be in a fear-based timeline. But Mars last was on the South Node October 7th-ish, 2023, during the Israel-Hamas attacks. And, Mars on the South Node again, it does feel to me like there is some sort of precision attack being carried out. I mean, and with Leo being kings and queens, like it does feel that way. Like there is some leader being taken out. Now, could it be a regime change entirely? I keep thinking about Iran because of the recent events, but like, could it be Iran's leader or something in a precarious spot? Maybe. So, yeah, revolution. I mean, there could be some revolutions here in certain countries, but what's definitely guaranteed is a revolution in philosophy, ideas, concepts, political theories. Because I think Uranus and Gemini is going to encourage a lot of people to get organized within their communities and to have really healthy debates about, what kind of fucking system are we living in right now? And is there, because, and I'm not here to be like, hey, we need to like rewrite the Constitution. I'm not here to tell you that. Like, I think that's a pretty radical assertion that doesn't really have a lot of grounds, right? Like, the Constitution is obviously a sacred document, and it is like any constitution, any nation's constitution, it is an algorithm. It's a code of conduct, and it's basically commanding humans to behave in a certain way along a certain set of rules and stipulations in order to preserve the system itself. Just like you would give ChatGPT a series of commands. So it is an algorithm that seems to work. So I'm not telling us to rewrite the algorithm, but I'm saying in certain countries that are highly oppressive, their algorithm could be rewritten. And yeah, in the United States, there could at least be a certain, scrutinization of, again, Citizens United and corporations being people, and why are they allowed to donate so much money to politicians, whatever it is. You can certainly evaluate and scrutinize those aspects of society without shredding up the whole thing. So, yeah, I mean, so these more provocative ideas are going to take hold, I think, when Uranus goes into Gemini. But yeah, this Leo new moon is very intense, very obsessive, addictive. It does feel like there's like a bitter X or something hanging around. With all that said, I'm going to go into the horoscopes now. I mean, I always come into these intending to only go on for maybe like an hour and 90 minutes, but it might not be happening that way today. Let's go with Aries first. So we'll go around the zodiac as always. And let me actually re level set here for a second. Um, so yeah, so I basically summarized, I feel like June and July pretty well. So now what we're going to do is walk through the new and full moon in July for each sign, and prioritize your rising sign, then go into your sun and moon signs. And as a quick, I don't know, promotion or whatever, like check out my Substack for more detailed horoscopes for all the new and full moons and other celestial events. I do weekly live readings on my Substack as well, and I have a show in Los Angeles that I do every month, the Hollywood Roosevelt. The last one was the most successful yet, and at that one, I think I did like 15 readings or something at the show. And I walked around the audience, and it was a lot of fun. So check out the show in July. I'll announce the tickets in a few days. And I will be launching astrology courses again in the next few days as well for intro, intermediate, and advanced astrology. So look out for those. And I will be doing coaching sessions in the near future, which is a new type of reading I'm doing where it involves a birth chart reading, transit reading, also sort of intake at the beginning where I just like hear more about what you're going through, what your goals are. And then the fourth hour of the reading is all about implementation strategy. So how do you actually build a plan to get to where you want to go? So that's going to be about a 4 hour intensive coaching session. So it's going to be by application only. And I'll be announcing that in the next few weeks. Those are for people who are really, really invested in their future and really willing to just go all in on the right type of reading. So, as many of you know, I've retired from doing the standard like birth chart reading or transit reading because I felt like that style where you're just opening your calendar so anyone can book. While I'm grateful that I did thousands of readings in the past few years, I also felt like sometimes people would come to me not really knowing why they were getting a reading. And I found that to be not ideal, to be honest. So I'd rather now, while I'm glad I've helped everybody, and I think you don't have to know why you're there for a reading necessarily, but I just want to like help people in a more directed sense, right? Like I want people to come in with their plan laid out of where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years? That's the type of reading I want to do from now on. I don't really I don't really feel as though like I can obviously help you like build something from the ground up. If you're like, I really don't know where to go next, that's we can do that. But the type of coaching session I'm going to be doing is for people who really just want to like excel at the highest level in something that they know that they're talented at, even if they're starting from scratch. I can help you assemble a plan. So yeah, anyways, let's go into the readings. I'm gonna have to keep these a little short, by the way. I'm chewed up a lot of time on the global stuff, and for a good reason. But anyways, Aries, the Capricorn full moon, July 10th, is in your 10th house of career. So for Aries, the Capricorn full moon, July 10th, very well could be a transition in your career. Perhaps you are, alleviating yourself of certain responsibilities or relieving yourself, I should say. You're letting go maybe of, again, a certain career, certain authority position. Maybe you are emotionally connecting with a parent more closely. And with Jupiter in the fourth, you are doing a lot of healing in your family, ideally. And so the 10th house full moon is maybe showing you that you also want to raise a family of your own, or you want to show up for your parent in a different way. But also Saturn's in your first, about to station retrograde. So you are taking your long-term goals very seriously. So on this full moon, you're asking yourself, what do I have to give up? What do I have to give up in order to, be in the right place 7 years from now or even more? Mars is conjunct the South Node this month in your sixth, which is showing that you are pushing really hard to strengthen your body, improve your physical health, take big chances with your fitness routine without overdoing it though, because of the South Node. So don't deplete yourself. Don't deplete your energy with that South Node conjunction. And then Venus, conjunct Uranus in the third, is showing a lot of social activity, idea generation. So maybe you're allowing new ideas to percolate, and that's motivating you even more to change your career, your professional course. And then we have the Leo new moon on July 24th, which is in your fifth house. So for Aries, the Leo new moon does feature a Mercury retrograde in the fifth for you. So it is a new beginning technically, but during Mercury retrograde, it's a new reflection, a new type of reflection for you. Reflection of what you're doing creatively. Maybe you're reuniting with an ex casual fling, so to speak. Maybe you're just reflecting on romance and your dating life generally. Maybe you're reflecting on, again, creative projects. And yes, it could be the birth of a new creative project entirely. Or you go on a date with someone new. With the opposition of Pluto, there's some intense power dynamics maybe with your friends. So avoid jealous friends, avoid creating drama by like dating a friend's ex or something. But also, if you really wanted to tap in to the full prowess or full power, I guess, of your creativity, you could do that. Venus remains in Gemini, this time squaring Mars. Avoid conflicts at work there with that square. Avoid disagreements with coworkers that are myopic and too they don't mistake the forest for the trees during that time. But also you could be like socializing a lot in your community and at work and like being really busy and picking up a lot of new skills. So now let's go to Taurus. I know I'm zipping through these, but I just want you to hang in there with me because it's just the reality of, again, the timeline I'm on. We just got to move through the horoscopes as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I think the Aries one was fantastic. So, no worries on that. Sorry. Okay, here we go. So Taurus. The Capricorn full moon on July 10th, although you're seeing it July 11th here, it's really July 10th, but into the 11th, is in your ninth house. So for Tauruses, maybe you decide to return home from a trip at that moment or around that time. Maybe some of you just have a celebratory experience while you're abroad or in another country or traveling. Other Tauruses realize that they have to set aside a certain educational path they've been striving for, and maybe they want to pivot to a different one, a different educational sphere now. Some Tauruses maybe realize that their worldview is insufficient and they need to let that go, that old worldview go, and explore a different perspective. Some Tauruses with that Capricorn full moon may realize that their perspective on life is a little bit too, I don't know, pessimistic or something, or they're selling themselves short. So like for Taurus is like, maybe you are actually becoming more optimistic. Others are, just realizing that they are able to complete and finish a media or publishing project around that time, which is great. Or you're realizing that you want to pursue some kind of new publishing venture. And even some Tauruses could step into a teaching role. I mean, Capricorn has a lot to do with authority. And the full moon could help you realize that, hey, I want to be in more of a teaching role. Maybe you're relating to your in-laws differently as well during this time. Now, Saturn is ruling this full moon, right? And it's in your 12th. So a lot of Tauruses are giving up. A lot of you are surrendering a career path that you maybe have had for like up to 7 years, if not more, when Saturn was in Capricorn. And yeah, I mean, for Tauruses, you're giving up potentially a career and realizing that in order to maybe transition to a different career, you just need a whole new perspective. So maybe you go traveling. Maybe you do re-enroll in an educational program. Maybe it's just as simple as a slight perspective shift. But with Saturn in your 12th, a lot of you are realizing that you don't resonate anymore with your current career path. So you're going to start to make adjustments. Others might be traveling to tend to an elder, actually. Venus Uranus in the second, you're taking a different approach to making money. Maybe you're experimenting with different jobs, having multiple jobs, using technology to make more money, like taking a job that's more experimental and future driven. And then with Jupiter in the third, you are definitely expanding your knowledge, your awareness, you're having more open conversations, especially emotionally with Cancer. Remember, with Jupiter and Cancer, we're focused on nurturing and healing family ties, understanding more about our ancestry, our roots, and even being more emotionally open and welcoming people into our orbit. And I think with Jupiter and Cancer, we're all realizing that we have to create that comfortable space. that emotional safe space. But we also have to heal the wounds with our family as much as we can. Or at the very least, I mean, to boil this down a little bit more, I guess, like we just want to feel like we have this emotional safe zone so that we can take risks in the first place. We have to have a reserve, a reservoir of emotional safety, I should say. Emotional safety so that, again, we can take these risks with Saturn and Aries and, all the fire and air energy that's coming out. It's like, Jupiter and Cancer is saying, like, hey, like, I still got to make sure I've got my creature comforts here, at the end of the day. Which might be easier to find when Uranus goes out of Taurus, actually. Like when Uranus leaves Taurus, it might be easier to stabilize around our material comforts. But with Jupiter and Cancer, it's really showing us like the emotional wellspring that we can tend to is of prime importance. So then we have the Leo new moon on July 24th. And that one's in your fourth house for Taurus. So Taurus, the Leo new moon on July 24th is potentially a new home. I mean, it's Mercury retrograde, so I wouldn't advocate that you move, but like maybe you just set a new vibe in your home. You redecorated, renovated, you host a party, you maybe even adopt a whole new perspective on fourth house matters, which could be family, caregiving, motherhood, well, caregiving generally, I guess, or your family, With Pluto opposing the new moon, you could find out a really shocking piece of information about your parent or family member, or you could start to dig into the financial aspects of your home or property, or explore buying or selling a property. And then Mars will be on the south node in the fifth, squaring Venus in the second. So you could be debating your values with somebody, or with Mars there, dealing with some conflict in a creative context. So if you're collaborating with people creatively, just avoid too much tension with them at the end of July. Some of you might have a frustrating experience, honestly, on a date in a romantic context. And if you have children, you might be experiencing some tension with your children. But that Leo new moon ideally helps you settle into a new energy within your home and family. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be again all that challenging. I mean, with Mercury retrograde in the fourth, maybe Tauruses are just like reevaluating how they've arranged their home, or they decide to uh, come into contact again with a family member. And then we also have Gemini. Gemini, the cap full moon on July 10th, July 11th, is in the eighth house of investing, financing, and shared resources, the subconscious, and all things taboo. So, Gemini, I mean, by that point, you do have Uranus and Venus in your sign. So, I just think generally, like early July, even around this full moon, you're feeling very social. You're feeling like you have this new eclectic type of taste. Maybe you're exploring a new fashion sense, and new routes to making money. You could be exploring new jobs, new careers. And with the full moon in the eighth, you're seeing the resulting effects on your finances, your savings, your debt, your investments. Um, Other Geminis are exploring the more secretive or shared energies in a relationship. So exploring the level of intimacy you have with your partner, exploring the financial strategy you have with your partner. And other Geminis might have some sort of like subconscious revelation rise to the surface through some spontaneous interaction with someone with Venus and Uranus in the first. Other Geminis might invest in AI or technology or something. In extreme cases, Geminis with the full moon in the eighth could divorce or separate from someone financially. But I like this time period generally for you because Uranus and Venus are in your sign. Now, Mars and the South Node are in the fourth, so that could create some discord in the family or at home. So manage tension in the home. Make sure that you're not, you know, experiencing too much stress in the home. So, maybe some of this is about fighting about mortgage or some other fourth house thing like. or fourth house connected things. So it could be like a mortgage or property acquisition or selling a property. But also Saturn's about to retrograde in your 11th there. So you're reflecting on what long-term friendship looks like and how you can create maybe a sustainable community over the long term. But you are really driving innovation in the world now, Gemini, and you're going to be at the center of experimentation and, trial and error and moving more quickly through life. Like you're going to be moving at a very quick pace now. But on this full moon specifically, I do think you're calibrating your investments primarily. And then the Leo new moon, July 24th, is in the third house. The Leo new moon is a new conversation that's very pivotal, maybe for you, especially with a sibling or a cousin or a relative. If you're a Gemini who, like, I don't know, has a contentious relationship with a sibling or a relative, even, you could have a sort of a intense conversation with them around July 24th, or a sibling reveals a secret to you, or vice versa. Others might investigate a subject, like just really thoroughly and develop a fascination with it and decide to learn more about it. Some Geminis could actually, you know, it could embark on a whole new learning journey. And honestly, the Leo new moon for you could be as simple as just having an intense conversation. And by then, Mars squares Venus, though, in your modality. So Gemini's at the end of July, you're more likely to experience a bit of an argument with someone, especially if they're a sister or a family member, like maybe even an aunt. So Mercury will be retrograde at that time as well, in the third. So with the Leo new moon, I wouldn't be shocked if some Geminis hear from an ex again through like a standard communication channel. And I wouldn't be surprised if that conversation is a little bit like involving some bitterness, resentment. So Geminis just, expect potentially to have a bit of a, contentious conversation or debate with somebody around July 24th, but on the positive side, it could crack open this fascination with a new topic that you learn a lot about, you do a lot of research about. So Cancers, the Cap full moon is in your seventh on July 10th and 11th. So Cancers, this full moon, as any full moon is in the seventh, could mark the ending of a relationship of any kind, romantic, platonic, professional. Or it could also just be a very serious discussion with someone about the future. How do we organize this relationship so it's resilient and durable and sustainable? Other cancers might be talking about, yeah, professional goals with somebody like, a business partner. And Saturn, is in the 10th now, about to retrograde. So some of you are talking about maybe parenthood, especially with Jupiter in your sign. You're talking about becoming a parent or preparing for parenthood and having a really serious discussion with your partner about that. Other cancers are realizing that if they want to reach a certain career milestone or if they want to be successful in a certain way in their life, that they have to part ways with somebody for some reason. Maybe you feel like your partner is holding you back. Others are just making a commitment, getting engaged or something. I mean, it could be that, or making a pledge of some kind. Like Capricorn is all about commitment. And then we have Mars in the third house. So some cancers are feeling very analytical and also driven to debate things and talk about process. So maybe you're just debating process with a business partner. I mean, it could be that simple. Maybe you are discussing a new book you want to write. And Venus and Uranus are now in your 12th. So Uranus is going to be in your 12th for 7 years approximately. And Uranus in the 12th, hyper intuitive. You're going to have wild dreams. Spirit guides are going to be telling you all kinds of useful and interesting stuff. And some of it's going to feel like clutter, though. But with Venus and Uranus in the 12th, you really have to avoid any kind of like behind the scenes relationship. Avoid the behind the scenes type of relationship. Don't do anything secretive or underhanded in relationships. Also, with Mercury in the second, you're thinking about spending and budgeting and money. But I think for cancers, this full moon is primarily about the long-term status of relationships, calibrating the long-term status of those relationships to support career growth. And it's like for cancers, you have to respond to a lot of pressure in your career right now with Saturn in the 10th. So you're basically trying to figure out like how do I reach all these career goals while maintaining a relationship? Like how ideally you just balance them out, right? But if you do anything kind of secretive in your relationship behind their back, they might find out and break up with you. Other cancers here in the 12th might develop they might like come upon a creative muse that helps them create or do creative writing. I actually think a lot of cancers are going to start doing channeled writing and they're just going to divine these amazing stories and things through like their dreams or their places of isolation and meditation, I guess. And then the Leo new moon, July 24th, is in the second house, opposing Pluto in the eighth. So a lot of cancers are going to be focused on and having really, really intense conversations about finances, money, income, salary, cash flow, income streams, all these things. And with Mars in the third, some of you are arguing with a partner maybe about money, or you're just arguing about money with somebody, or you are, you know, trying to analyze things so intensely or develop a process around things in order to make more money. But like, don't obsess too much over money because it could almost conjure a lot of fears. So cancers avoid, you know, succumbing to fears around scarcity and don't have a scarcity mindset, I guess. And I know a lot of cancers are watching this being like, well, Evan, you promised us that Jupiter in Cancer would bring us good luck. That's not all that's going on. And also, Jupiter doesn't just bring you good luck every day, all the time. A lot of times, Jupiter leaves a gift on its way out of a sign, right? So for Cancer, it's like things are looking up for you. I think August is your best month, though. So I'll reserve, the really good news for August. But July, absolutely. You could be on the ascent and gaining more ground and finding more success, feeling more gratitude. And by the way, that's what Jupiter and Cancer has a lot to do with. Is not only being emotionally welcoming and open, but having gratitude for your family. No matter how contentious your relationship is with them, having gratitude for your family is, paramount, I think. And that's how you open the door to abundance. So if you're asking me, when am I going to become a millionaire? By the way, like you hate everyone in your family, like that's not good because that's a lower vibration. So really trying to heal the cord, because you have a cord with your family energetically, right? Not just an umbilical cord. So heal that and, find to the greatest extent possible the emotional safe space with them. I know that there's extenuating circumstances. Some of you will never be able to heal to rectify the situation with your family. I get that. But to the extent possible, heal that connection with your family and cultivate that wellspring of emotional support and nurturing with in your family because it will ease you. It will ease your fears and concerns, I promise you, because we all come from a womb and a portal of life, So no matter how you feel about your mother now, it's like she birthed you. So really trying to heal that relationship is important because it will give you a safe space to excel and thrive. And that's how cancers find abundance during Jupiter and Cancer. It starts with the family and the roots and the foundation. It doesn't start with acquisition of materials. That's not how this works. It's about gratitude and appreciation for the people who brought you into the world. I know that that sounds old school and annoying and, daddy Saturn type of energy, but like that's just the type of astrologer I am. Number one, but number two, I think this is proven for sure, like that the people who have positive relationships with their family, or at least are striving to, like they will have better experiences in their life, whether it's through relationships and with other people, or it puts them in an abundance mindset, I think, generally. So, really trying to start with that nourishment of the ground that you were born on is a good starting point. But again, I understand that. there's a lot of trauma in families, and there's family members who have done things that are unforgivable. I get all of that. But again, it's all to illustrate that Jupiter starts with, in Cancer, having that emotional support, and then the material gain follows. So for Cancers, you kind of have to overcome maybe your fear around losing money or not having enough of something during the Leo new moon on July 24th. And Jupiter can help you there in Cancer. And then with Saturn retrograde in your 10th, you are thinking about whether or not you want to like fully leave behind the career that you're in because you're exhausted by it because of all the Saturnian pressure, or you're deciding if you want to double down on it, right? Yeah, if you want to double down on it and you know, get mileage out of Saturn being in your 10th to kind of reach the apex. So now let's go to Leo. So Leo, you have the Capricorn full moon, July 10th and 11th in your sixth house. So for Leos, it's very much a reorientation around your daily routine, your health practices, fitness, and your work process. So this full moon could help you kind of get to the finish line with, projects you've been working on. It could also bring about a new dynamic with a coworker, but a lot of you might even be like saying goodbye to a coworker, like maybe a coworker is switching teams or companies. You could also experience a change of heart with a pet. Like, what do you want to have a pet? Maybe you decide you want to have a pet there with the full moon and the sixth. You just decide, oh, I want to adopt a pet after all, or I want to have a pet. Saturn is ruling the full moon from the ninth. So a lot of Leos might be realizing that, hey, I'm hitting a wall with my work and I want to go back to school to attain the level of education necessary to continue thriving at my work. Or maybe you're realizing that, oh, I have to travel somewhere for work, but I don't really want to. Or I want to go to this place, but I don't have access to that place for some reason with Saturn in the ninth. Like I can't get to that country for some reason. Mars, conjunct the South node in your second house is showing that you're being a little bit more efficient probably with how you're spending money, but you are still spending money probably quite frequently there. And maybe dealing with some frustration around money and spending and finance, or not finance, but like just with spending. And some of you are trying to, just tighten your financial belts a little bit and spend less. We have Venus and Uranus in the 11th there, which I love. It's very social media driven. If you're a Leo, all of July is great for content creation, social media investment, and all of that. Jupiter in the 12th is showing you that you want to be a little bit more behind the scenes this year, I think. That's, being behind the scenes, either raising a family or just nurturing yourself and making your home a sanctuary is key. And Mercury is direct, pre-shadow, and you're first at this time. So you are doing a lot of communicating, a lot of problem solving, and you're keeping busy, but you're aware that you're going to have to reflect on some of these decisions. So yeah, overall, the Cap full moon in the sixth is, you know, it can be kind of industrious and productive. It can get you to the finish line with a work-related project, but it can also point out some long-term, some type of long-term health trajectory that you have to keep in mind. And then the Leo new moon on July 24th is in the first house, opposing Pluto. Um, Leos, if you were to find out a secret about a partner, it's during that new moon. Others are committing to transforming their relationship or to ending it. I mean, Pluto can be decimating a relationship there in the seventh house. So, Leos, I'm not going to lie, this new moon could be very challenging for you if you don't trust your partner, if you don't know what's really going on in your relationship. And you might find something out through social media, through a friend or at an event or something about your partner. There's something a little weird maybe going on there with your partner. Others will develop an intense obsession with somebody that they are interested in, which I don't know if that's a good thing, but you might be a little obsessed with somebody. So, Leos, you're kind of oscillating between extremes in partnership and also maybe dealing with a validation addiction if you have one. Like maybe you're realizing that, hey, like my cup is never going to be filled by this partner because they're just because I'm just asking for validation without feeling whole and complete within myself. Some Leos might go through that. And I'm not saying that all Leos are addicted to validation, but that might get brought up. And with Mercury retrograde in your sign, an ex could come back for sure. Ex could come back and have a really intense conversation with you, reveal something to you. And by that time, Mars will square Venus from your 11th house, where Venus is. So some of you are going to have an argument with a friend about spending or about money or about values. Um, yeah. So ideally, you use that new moon to birth a new beginning in your life that is transformative, is a little bit intense, but it helps you go deeper with a partner, right? In a way that is alchemical. And again, transformative, where you and your partner are going deeper than you've ever gone before, or just sharing in energy with someone else in a really intense, sort of profound moment. So, Virgo, you have the Cap full moon in the 5th on July 10th and 11th. So, Virgo, this full moon is creative, romantic. It is trying to, I think, accomplish something very noteworthy, maybe in a creative forum. Or Virgos, you're putting on a performance. Other Virgos might end a relationship that was more casual. And Saturn is ruling the full moon from the ninth, from the 8th, sorry. And Saturn in the 8th, just kind of peeking its head into the 8th, but it is showing you that you're going to have to go through a tower moment at some point between now and April 2028. Saturn and Aries in the 8th could show you the way to building a business, though, during that transit. But I think for this full moon in particular, you might end a casual relationship. And in the wake of that, you're facing some fears in the 8th house, or you're going through a dark night of the soul or a tower moment. So if you have an unhealthy casual partnership, you might be ending it here in order to go on a bit more of a self-reflection journey. Venus and Uranus are in the 10th, which is, I think, really positive. Venus and Uranus in the 10th is going to help you take on a more experimental approach to your career. You know, Uranus in the 10th shows that Virgos are going to be focused on a career either in tech or innovation increasingly over the next 7 years. With Venus and Uranus there, you could be like creative in a sort of a genius way at your work. Or you are conceiving of a different way to relate to your parent or something. But I do think a lot of Virgos are stepping into more technologically driven careers here. Maybe uncoupling with a creative partner though, with the 5th house full moon and Saturn in the 8th. But with Jupiter in the 11th, a lot of you are finding greater success with communities and friendships, and your friends are truly becoming a nurturing community for you over the next year. Mars is in the first, so you are making bold moves. And you are, yeah, taking risks. And maybe for some of you, you are stepping into entrepreneurship with Saturn in the 8th, Mars in the first. And maybe if you're on social media, you're reaching more people through your social media endeavors now, experiencing greater virality. But yeah, this 5th house moon, I think it can be very creatively fulfilling. And just a second, I have to adjust something here. Sorry about that. So to kind of continue on, you might be doing something that's creatively fulfilling, or maybe you are again ending a more casual relationship for the sake of maybe focusing on your entrepreneurial journey, your business. But overall, I think Virgos actually are kind of in the best position in July, except for the moment when Mars conjuncts the South Node, which is happening, around July 20th, but also even on the Leo new moon, July 24th. So that Leo new moon is in the 12th house. And the 12th house new moon with Mercury retrograde in the 12th could be a very sleepy new moon for you. It could help you, though, address either mental health or physical health challenges or addictions. For others, it's just very spiritually reflective on that new moon. But with Mars South Node conjunct in your first house or in your sign, it is a bit of a contentious, fractious energy. right? Do wonder if you're getting into a big debate, a big fight, or skirmish with somebody, and it squares Venus in the 10th. So you could be getting into a dispute with a family member or parent, most likely, or someone you work for, or a boss. So for some of you, the Leo new moon is actually your breakaway moment from a job or something where you disagree with the company policy or the way that you're being staffed on work projects. So some Virgos are just like stepping into their own pathway. And with that square to Venus, I think not only with the square to Venus, but with Uranus in the 10th. For a lot of you, it's just like providing the grounds to, again, enter a more experimental phase in your career. But that Leo new moon could even be kind of trippy with your dreams. Like your dream world could be a little bit more intense and transformative, but also opposing Pluto in the sixth. I mean, to be honest, some of you might be discovering something about, your health or maybe about a coworker in the sixth or about a pet. But the 12th house new moon could even show that you're exhausted and depleted a little bit. You need to take a break. So, as a Virgo, like if I were a Virgo, I would just kind of plan to take it easy for the last 2 weeks of July. But like, let it be known that overall, I like July for you. It's socially expansive, socially nurturing. The career looks kind of avant-garde now for you, perhaps even entrepreneurial. But the very end of the month is better served for resting. And with Mercury retrograde in the 12th, it's very trippy, very nebulous, but also giving you sort of a non-linear way to look at things in your life and to look at your spirituality, even. Libra, let me actually back up a day to get the moon back in Cap. So we've gone through one half of the zodiac. The second half of the zodiac is next. And Libra, the Cap full moon is in the fourth. So the full moon in the fourth marks a completion, release point for the home, family, property related areas. And, maybe you will actually move to a new home. Perhaps instead you will just have an emotional moment of openness with your family. Jupiter is in the 10th, so you are exploring new opportunities in your career for sure. A lot of Libras are starting to gain more momentum in their career, which is great. But that's contending with Saturn now in your seventh, right? So it is, and the full moon is ruled by Saturn. So what I'm seeing for Libras is Saturn is demanding a lot of you in your relationships, whether it's a business relationship or marriage or something. But Jupiter is sort of showing you that there is a growth area in your career. So Libras, whether this is connected directly to the full moon or not, I think that a lot of you are realizing that you want more out of your career now. You want to take a bigger leap in your career. You want to expand into a new career. But Saturn is showing that a partner might be holding you back a little bit, or you just have to balance these two priorities and realize that you have to sustain a relationship that really matters to you while also aiming for your career and finding a compromise in the middle where you're allocating time to both. Um, Mars in the 12th shows hidden enemies, though. With Saturn in the 7th, a hidden enemy could come in to end your relationship if they're envious of your connection with somebody. So, Libras, be really careful about surrounding yourself with like your partner's exes or being anywhere near their ex's friends or something. Um, Fourth house could also show that you have responsibilities now in your family, or that you have to commemorate a family member who passed away. Some Libras are going, I'm not trying to break news, and some of you might already know about this, but some Libras maybe are attending a funeral or something in July. Venus and Uranus are in the ninth now. So during this month of July, some of you are thinking more experimentally about where you want to travel, what you want to learn about at a higher educational level. Or maybe you're embarking on new media projects, writing. I mean, publishing is kind of the ninth house, right? But I wouldn't be surprised if a Libra were to like travel somewhere unexpected with Uranus there and then come up with this really interesting idea for a story. Mercury's in a pre-shadow phase in the 11th. So You are connecting with quite a few people. So I think some Libras are, going to parties and socializing, but again, don't attract the evil eye from someone's ex or whatever. Like anyone who is bitter about something that you have, just try to avoid them in the beginning of July and really the whole month, honestly, of July. And then we have the Leo new moon, July 24th in the 11th house with Mercury retrograde in the 11th. So Libras, the new moon in the 11th, in theory, could help you adopt a new friendship, pick up a new friendship, join a new community, go to a concert, go to a party. With Mercury retrograde, you're likely to connect or reconnect with an old friend. Also, opposing Pluto in the fifth, there might be some sort of backstabbing going on with a friend. So again, like, really make sure that you are aware of like who's on your team truly within your friend group. Others would instead, though, just like really put on this transformative performance and show, I think. Kind of like Aries, too, are in that position. But both Libra and Aries could put on like a really epic performance or go to a concert or something like that around the Leo new moon on July 24th. So let's go to Scorpio. The Capricorn full moon for you is in the third house. So anytime there's a Cap full moon and this one is around July 10th. Cap full moon in the third house is a very serious conversation, or you're deciding to wrap up a writing project, a book or something, or you are sort of learning something new or realizing that you have more to learn in a certain subject. So, yeah, some of you might be, writing, teaching, and Saturn rules the full moon in the sixth. So with Saturn ruling the full moon, some of you are learning about your health. You're getting some news that you have to work on something health related long term. And maybe instead you would be just realizing that there's just more inside tricks and tips that you can learn about regarding how to improve health. Venus and Uranus are in the eighth at this point, so it is showing you alternative ways to invest money, and it's going to open up your psychic powers. If you already probably have them, but like it's going to really open them up when Uranus goes into the eighth. So you're going to generate a lot of new insights and ideas. You're going to be able to channel more easily. You might become interested in like even more esoteric and occult subjects. And some of you will invest in tech or AI. Jupiter's in the ninth, so some of you are maybe thinking about traveling or teaching, going back to school, furthering your perspective, basically. Mars is in the 11th, conjunct the South Node pretty much. So Scorpios, be careful what you say on social media around this time. Don't draw the ire of anyone on social media or in your communities. And then Mercury pre-shadow on the 10th. You're really busy in your career. You're getting a lot done in your career, but some of the steps you're taking in your career, you will have to reflect on when Mercury goes retrograde. And then we have the Leo new moon, July 24th and the 10th. So in theory, this is the birth of a new career. Although Mercury's retrograde, right? So maybe it's just a new type of reflection on your career progress. Maybe you're communicating that you're becoming a parent, or maybe you're finding out that you're becoming a parent. Maybe you learn a secret about your parent, actually. Some of you might be learning something about your parent, a secret about them, or you may learn that your parents are trying to like sell their property or reinvest in their property in a different way. I mean, I know a lot of Scorpios who have had some like family sort of changes in like family property and investments in property. And Mars will be on the South Node at that time in the 11th, squaring Venus in the 8th. So again, be careful what you say online, be careful what communities you participate in. Just don't like inflame people online, I would say, and also make sure that you're just kind of managing diplomatically your connection with your friends. Because you could kind of get into a major dispute with a friend at the end of the month. But otherwise, the new moon is theoretically the birth of a new cycle in your career. You could start a new job or take up a whole new set of activities in your career, or decide that you want to become a parent, or you could realize that you're becoming a parent. But I think in Leo, it's like you might be taking more creative risks in your career, which is great. So, Sagittarius, the Capricorn full moon is in your second house of money, personal possessions, natural talents. This full moon definitely will reveal to you your financial realities, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you're just defining a little bit more your financial realities, coming up maybe with a new budget, or maybe some of you are transitioning to a different salary package at your job, and it's ruled by Saturn in the fifth. Some of you might decide with the full moon in the second house of values that you value the idea of having children at some point, or you realize that you'd like to monetize something you're doing creatively. Some of you might have to give money to your children. Like if you have a child who's like maybe 18 or 19, maybe they come to you asking for money or something. Jupiter in the eighth is showing that you're expanding your finances ideally. Your shared resources are a bright spot, and you're just expanding your knowledge of the subconscious too, by the way. Mars in the 10th, conjunct the South Node broadly, shows some conflict with a parent or with a boss at your work. And the other thing I want to mention though is Venus conjunct Uranus in the seventh. I mean, this is the defining transit, I think, for Sag in July. It does indicate a lot of experimentation now in your relationships. If you want to free yourself from somebody, you'll do that in July. You'll break up, you'll run away from the partner, like for the sake of greater freedom. Or you'll demand greater authenticity in your relationship and you'll get that. So not all Sages are breaking up, but you're certainly wanting to either rearrange or experiment with the relationship or demand greater autonomy and almost liberation from that person. Or again, you want to be in a relationship where it's just like independence is more so honored and both parties are just expressing their authenticity, like I said. Or you just come up with a different arrangement. Maybe it's polyamory, open relationship. Or you just start to develop closer connections with an entire community. And then the Leo new moon is, and by the way, sorry, the Uranus transit takes 7 years to play out. So it's not like every day for the next 7 years will be like that for relationships, but especially it will be right now because Venus will be co-present with Uranus in your seventh. So now let's talk about the Leo new moon in your ninth. The Leo new moon in the ninth could be you embarking on a new trip abroad or across the country. Maybe you're starting a new educational path. Maybe you're going on a new journey to publish something. Maybe you're having a new dynamic with a relative or a cousin or a sibling or something, or an in-law, I guess. The ninth house would be in-laws. And the ninth house is a lot of times subtle. It's just about adopting a new perspective. So Sag, you might just be adopting a new perspective at the end of the month. With Mercury retrograde in the ninth at that time, avoid, making careless mistakes while you're traveling. I mean, like, plan for delays, have backup plans. So if you're a Sag who's traveling at the end of the month, definitely have contingency plans and so on. But wherever you travel will be a very transformative experience, I think, for you with the opposition of Pluto. And, it could completely change your entire perspective on your life. Mars conjunct the South Node at that time, where Venus in the seventh shows that you could get into an argument with either a parent or a partner, or maybe the partner is causing tension for you at work, vice versa. Maybe your parent disapproves of your partner. So there's some drama there connected to career and relationship or, parent and relationship. And honestly, with Mars on the South Node in the 10th, you could be so frustrated that you're like, screw it. I'm just gonna leave this career behind. And then let's go to Capricorn. The full moon is in your sign on July 10th. The full moon in somebody's sign would show that that sign is, epically releasing all these emotions and Capricorn responsibilities, or realizing that they have to take responsibility over something. So the full moon for you is very emotional here. It's bringing up the whole concept of parents and parenthood. A lot of Cap risings. end up having some kind of like emotional moment with like their father or their mother around the time of the full moon there. But a lot of you, it's just like a release point, purging, you're shedding your skin, releasing what doesn't serve you anymore. It's ruled by Saturn in the fourth. So with Saturn in the fourth, I do think a lot of you will learn of a responsibility that you have to take over a family member. I think a lot of you will have to take care of an aging parent around this time. Or you will discover that you'd like to move or settle into a longer term home. Or you'll just be expressing your emotions more so than usual. But I think it is connected to your family. Mars will be in the ninth. Some of you want to travel somewhere else for vacation or something, but I feel like there's a family member saying, hey, no, you got to come here and tend to this family issue. I think a lot of you will have to do that. And Venus and Uranus are in your sixth now. So your work routine is going to be a little bit more random for the next 7 years. You're not going to have a consistent routine always, but it will bring you into a more experimental mindset with your career and your work process. So also, um, Venus conjunct Uranus could just make your work more eclectic and interesting in July. Maybe it's more experimental and innovative, like I said. And with the trine to Pluto, it could actually help you make more money or transform your income in some way. And then you have Jupiter in the seventh. Remember that. So you just had a Cancer new moon in your seventh. After this full moon, you will have already had the new moon. I mean, or before this full moon, you will have already had the new moon. So like a Cancer new moon ideally brings in a new partnership or a new partnership with somebody who's more emotionally available or open. And so on this full moon, maybe you're just like allowing yourself to share in that emotional space with that partner. Or maybe you want to travel with a partner with Jupiter in the seventh, but that trip is cut short because of a family obligation. It honestly wouldn't shock me. But overall, Capricorns, their relationships are getting better. They're becoming more emotionally open, like I said, and resonant. And yeah, I think that's the bright spot, right? That's the best news you could probably hear. The Leo new moon on July 24th is in the eighth. So that is showing you a new avenue to maybe pursue a different investing strategy, financial strategy. With Mercury retrograde in the eighth, maybe you're reevaluating all of that. It could also help you actually dig into your fears, your subconscious, especially fears around money. And because Mercury is retrograde in the eighth, I think you are going to be reflecting on a lot of your fears. And if you're in a partnership with any resources that you share, you're going to be reflecting on the possessions that you share together. Like, do we need to own all these things? Is this the right way to co-invest in like a certain asset? Mars will be on the south node by that time, squaring Venus in your sixth. So, yeah, if you're traveling, just be mindful of that because your travels could be a little frustrating in end of July, or you're disputing with a coworker about something while you're traveling, especially if you're traveling with them. So again, be mindful of that. So as long as you don't experience too much stress with your travels, and as long as your family isn't too much of a source of stress right now, I do think July can electrify your work daily routines, and it can be like a proof of concept for your relationship that you have now. And it can show that the relationship is truly intimate. Who wouldn't want that? Aquarius, the Capricorn full moon is in the 12th, so a very spiritual house, a very restful house. It's about the liminal spaces between the end and the beginning. It's about karma, past life karma. Again, endings, release points, spiritual meditation, places of isolation. So Aquarius, this is just a very reflective full moon for you. You are acknowledging any structure that you still need to really establish with your nighttime routines as well, by the way. So if your sleep needs to improve, you'll find that out. If you need to take a break and rest for a week, you'll find that out. If you want to develop more of a structure with your spiritual practices and meditation, you'll find that out. On this full moon, you'll do that, you'll tackle that. If you want to address any mental health challenges on the full moon, this is the time to do it. Or if you want to address any mental health challenges in general, this is the full moon for it. It's ruled by Saturn in the third. So yes, I actually think some of you are navigating some slightly pessimistic thoughts and feelings, and you're addressing those, getting to the bottom of them. Other Aquariuses are a little burned out from maybe some schooling program that's really arduous, taking a break from it. And others are just delving into their spiritual practices. You do have Jupiter in the sixth, so you're really expanding your awareness and knowledge of like different healing tactics, and your physical health is hopefully getting better. But now with the full moon in the 12th, you're realizing that, well, maybe you're just realizing that your improved physical health is helping your mental health. I mean, that could be the thing. With Saturn in the third now, though, you're taking your thoughts very seriously. You're taking your education very seriously. You're writing very seriously. And ideally, though, you're really looking to find this sense of mental wellness and mental balance. Venus and Uranus are in the fifth, so it's experimentally creative. You're going to be more experimental with your creativity. You're going to, I think, just take a more avant-garde approach to your creativity in general. And if you are looking to get into the dating scene again, your dates could be more eclectic and interesting, surprising. Um, but yeah, if you're a musician, you're gonna have a great Uranus in the fifth house experience, I think, over the next few years. 7 years, really. But even right now, with Venus and Uranus in the fifth, like be eminently creative, right? Like just really push your creativity from different angles right now. And again, maybe you'll go on a blind date. I think a lot of Aquariuses could go on a blind date that just ends up being surprisingly interesting. And then the Leo new moon on July 24th is in the seventh, during a Mercury retrograde also in the seventh. So that new moon theoretically could plant the seeds for a new partnership. And it's trining Saturn, by the way. So like the new partnership could sort of educate you about something in a way that helps you out in the long run. But also there could be a secret that gets revealed in a partnership because of the opposition of Pluto. But also Pluto's transformative. So it's like you get so intense with your partner that both of you transform in the process. That could be the other thing. And then Mars is in the eighth, conjunct the South Node at that time, square Venus in the fifth. So some of you might fight with a partner about money, or you'll just have a financial dispute generally. Others will go on a surprising date, and it will lead to an intimate place with Mars in the eighth. Um, Now, I have to be honest, I think some Aquariuses will conceive unexpectedly. When Mars conjuncts the South Node in the eighth and your Venus and Uranus are in the fifth, does feel that way to me. I think some Aquariuses are conceiving at the end of July. But if that's not you, could just be more of a financial dispute, like I said, or with Mars in the eighth, you're releasing frustration. You're purging the frustration, especially any feelings of resentment or bitterness. You're finally releasing those things. Because in the seventh house of open enemies with that new moon, you could be confronting someone that you kind of detest. But you're realizing in that confrontation that you have to just let go of your anger. It's not healthy for you. You might even be realizing as an Aquarius that you have to stop obsessing over somebody. But again, for some of you, it could be a transformative relationship. And then Pisces, Capricorn full moon is in the 11th. So this full moon for you is, I mean, I think it should be pretty good. It could mark this very emotional, profound, powerful performance in front of an audience. It could also show you the results of all your social media efforts. You go viral, your content reaches more people than ever. And Capricorn is about commitments, right? So it also shows you whether or not you're willing to commit to this social media project in the long run, or this community, or this friendship. And indeed, some of you might be purging a friendship at that time, or reinforcing the alliance with that friend and pledging sort of a commitment to that friend. Saturn does rule the full moon in the second. and Jupiter squares it in the fifth. So I've said this before, but a lot of Pisces are embarking on more creative careers. A lot of Pisces are finding more success with their creativity, or they just want to do something more creative. With a square to Saturn in the second, though, it's showing you that it kind of elongates the timeline to monetization. It's going to take you longer to monetize fully or reach your financial goals because you're doing something more creative now. Nevertheless, I think the full moon could be very rewarding for you and could help you express your creative gifts to a crowd or an audience. Venus conjuncts Uranus in the fourth, and this is about, maybe hosting a social event at your house or, yeah, like a game night, suddenly wanting to move, maybe. And that's kind of a feeling you'll have off and on over the next 7 years, but like, you might feel that way a little bit at that time even. And then Mars in the seventh shows that you're feeling more forceful and assertive and independent in relationships, meaning you're willing to command your own autonomy in a relationship, but you could face more conflict with the partner, especially in the home with Venus squaring it. And then we have the Leo new moon on July 24th and the 6th with Mercury retrograde. So the Leo new moon in the 6th could indicate to you that there's a different health practice you want to adopt, different fitness routine. Maybe you are learning about something related to your health. Maybe you're deciding you want to have a pet. With Mercury retrograde in the sixth, though, I think a lot of you are reflecting on work, health, fitness, and whether or not there's enough creative fire within your career. Um, and Mars is exactly pretty much conjunct the South Node at that time, squaring Venus in the fourth. So a lot of Pisces, you do have to watch out for arguments and disputes with your partner at the end of the month, especially regarding expenditures in the home or expenditures within the family or property investment related things. Yeah. So Pisces, maintain a diplomatic stance in your relationships by the end of the month. And also find a way to reinfuse creativity within your work process or your career. Um, and just sort of like toy around with like different health practices. I think the new moon could really, with an opposition to Pluto, even help you tap into a psychic level of understanding about what needs to change with your health. I think some Pisces are dealing with some very strange ailments right now because Saturn has been in your sign for the past few years. And so this new moon could show you that you could kind of download the information about what needs to change psychically without having to go to like a medical person about it. Or maybe medical professionals have not been able to figure it out. And now suddenly you sort of divine it and you're like, wow, right side of the body is the father's side, and all my health problems are on the right side. So maybe it's something with the father. So now you meditate on the father and you realize, oh, okay, it's something with that argument I had with my father when I was 6 years old, and it affects my right foot because it's also connected to the ancestry, and Pisces rules the foot. Whatever journey you want to go in there. I think there's something you're divining about your health around that new moon. So this was a long video. It was a very sprawling video, but I hope that it still gave you some guidance and help for the month of July. July is very complex. It does bring in this influx of fire and air, even more so. Hopefully, preserving itself in an emotional safety bubble with Jupiter and Cancer. Like, you still need a support system, even as you're moving through life at 1,000 miles an hour. I do think that some of the global conflicts will calm down a little bit until maybe next April, or next February, really, I guess. Whenever Mars reaches 0 or 1 degree of Aquarius. But nevertheless, July is revolutionary in terms of thought, political thought, theories, ideas. There could be some regime change, though, right, with Saturn, Pluto, and with their retrogrades. But yeah, with Mars and Virgo, like expect to have a productive month overall. Like you're going, and I didn't really talk about that much today, which I regret, but here we are talking about it anyways, at least. Mars and Virgo is going to make you more productive. Jupiter and Cancer is going to put the focus on somatic healing. It's going to bring you back into your body, help you identify what you need to feel nurtured and to have that sustenance. It's going to help you construct an emotional safe space within your family or within your home that helps you take risks in the first place. But you are also underscoring the need for autonomy with Saturn and Neptune and Aries, and bringing that autonomous self into communities with Pluto and Uranus in air signs. So, yeah, I mean, and with Mercury retrograde, right? Overall, you want to, make sure that you practice proper decision making, carefully audit and evaluate your decision making process before you make the decision. I'm going to have a separate newsletter about Mercury retrograde. I didn't fully talk about it today, but that would have added even more time to this video. But overall, just expect to feel more productive than you did when, like Mars was in Cancer and Leo for like 10 months combined. It was only in two signs for like 10 months, going back to last September. I mean, that sucks, I think. Like Mars in Cancer and Leo were forming tough aspects with Uranus or Chiron. So now that Mars is in Virgo, it's kind of a relief, right? We're more productive, more process driven, nose to the grindstone. So continue that. But in July, it will conjoin the South Node, which is frustrating. It's almost like a puncture of some kind. It's breaking through something. It's a little aggressive, but it is also helping you maybe release frustrations that are overly myopic and missing the big picture. So it's also very cerebral as a time period because Venus is in Gemini. So a lot of you are going to be having a lot of intellectual debates with people and debating process with people. So if you're looking to learn AI, finally do it this month. If you're looking to streamline your workflow, do it this month. If you're looking to explore more, I don't know, natural ways of giving birth or something, do it this month. And if you're looking to build up your autonomy, do it this month. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, but hopefully this helped you coordinate it a little bit. I think this conclusion is very important. So thank you so much and take care.